Hey everybody, welcome. Today I have Ryan Jones with me from Kohl's Kicking in Syracuse, where it's a lovely 2 degrees
Uh,
this
the
January
past few
morning or
weeks,
February morning.
yeah, we're starting to get lucky. We have a high of 41 today, but before this, the last couple of days, it's been around like the feel like has been like negative 20 or so. So we're
Oh,
starting to get into a little bit warmer weather. So
okay. A
still
little
not
bit
as nice as
warmer weather.
Arizona where you are.
Yeah, I'm not going to complain. I think 67 in the morning, 80s in the day. We're not
Yeah,
complaining yet. So,
yeah, I would love to have that. I gotta wait till June, I think.
yeah. Yeah, and then you can pick on me when it's 120.
Yeah, yeah.
But
So
today, we're going to talk about this transition piece for college, the college guys, and also that high school to college, because it's a real important part. As we were talking before we jumped on the recording, it's, kind of right now, it's these high school kids that have finished their senior season in high school. They're committed to college, or maybe they're still kind of there might be a few still waiting, right? Some coaches make decisions after spring ball. Maybe they'll get some commits. But that piece where I notice, even at the very high level, they're committed to a great D1, they still somehow mess around.
yeah,
But I get it.
yeah.
They're not really committed to a team, kind of on paper, but they haven't shown up. They've got no one holding them accountable to workouts, no one really holding them accountable to kicking, snapping, whatever it might be. So and you talked about how you kind of have some right now in that space. So what are you doing? What do you recommend? And how do you teach them through? Because you coach high school, right?
Yep.
Currently. So how
Yeah.
do you teach them through? Say talk about a freshman or a sophomore or a junior that's going to be getting there. Do you start prepping them early? What do you do?
And you're talking like for current high school kids,
Yeah.
so I mean, I try to think about it in the sense of like with where I'm at now here at CBA Syracuse with my specialists, I honestly trying to keep in mind that they are high school, but also I think about it, if I can help them understand what college is going to be like, maybe to like a good general idea, because then, what I experience in college can be completely different than what they might when they get to college, right? But,
Yeah.
if I can give them a general idea of what to expect, I think this goes back to your question is kids struggle with the transition from the high school level to the collegiate level. That's one of the things that makes it hard is you go from high school, you're living with mom and dad,
Mhm.
your everything's cooked for, your laundry's done, everything you're taking care of. You're still a kid where, I know there's a kicker that is early enrollee at Georgia that, you're right into it. You went from Christmas break, you were
Mhm.
just with your high school buddies, and then Christmas is done, and
Yeah.
then you're rolling in right at University of Georgia with an SEC program with guys that, just came back. You're 17, 18 years old. You've got to pretty much live on your own. Laundry, you got to do all that. You got to start
Right.
adulting real quick. And,
Manage
for me,
your
like,
schedule.
yeah, exactly. And
Mhm.
at a high level, right? And for me, it was, I didn't early enrollee, but I walked the stage when I graduated in June, the first week of June. And that night I moved into Cincinnati. And then the
Wow.
following day, you're right into off-season lifting. And
Okay.
like for me, I never touched a weight. I was a soccer player. So like, I had a strength coach, but we never really messed with weights. It was all flexibility and body weight stuff that I trained with, right before I left. So, but I was, like I said, I was right back, or thrown right into the fire, and you're expected to perform, right? And I
Yeah.
think that's one of the things is, um, I don't, they're there to, I don't want to say they're not going to hold your hand, right? They want to help you be successful, but the expectation is way up here. So, you've got to roll in as if you've been doing it for months because everybody else, if you think in the summer, most of those guys are either portal guys
Yeah.
or current guys coming back from last year's roster. So they already know what it's like. So I think going to like back to the high school question, like with my guys here, I try to make it where, they do the stuff with the team. So we have special teams period before practice starts, after warm up, and then in the middle of practice we do some form of special teams period again, and then we always end with the field goal
Okay.
session. In between the first period of special teams and that middle period in the practice, we try to work on drill work, but I'm trying to monitor, with these guys, reps, and just trying to take care of the bodies. Because then, you know, it's not overthinking it, but, we don't have the access to the recovery tools like you do in college. You don't have the cold tubs, the plunges, the hot
Yeah.
tubs, the Normatex, things like that. So how can I do 45 minutes of good drill work to help these guys just get a little bit better each day, but not blow their legs out, with kicking a lot in practice as well. So that's for me. I think about it that way. And then in the game experience, and I try to do, my mindset is really, what did I not have in high school that I can give to these guys now, that I know, that I learned from really college and then kind of post college. For the couple years I just messed around with training for the NFL and trying to give myself a shot. And the best example I can give is, like, if we're in a game situation, the team just kicked off to us and we have the ball at the 20, at that current moment, my long snapper and punter, they are catching snaps, punter's working his hands, working his drops. Once the ball crosses the 50 or crosses to where we're realistically in field goal range, we
Right.
transition into field goal snaps. And then my kicker, punters, now for us, our punter wasn't our holder. So, we are having somebody hold the field goal snaps. And then my kicker is now in the net and he's warming up a couple field goals. And then, say if it gets to second down or third down, whether it's punt or field goal, I bring them over and we start talking situational. So,
Okay.
like, if it's 3rd and 10, whether our OC is a great guy, and most of the time we do get it, but I want to prepare as if we're gonna have to go. So it's when they're actually thrown out there, there's less thinking and it's just more, hey, go out there and do my job. So, like I said, if it's 3rd and 10 and we're punting, the ball's on the right hash, we just go over what's our target line, what line are we taking. And this goes back to stuff that we do in prep for practice week. Pre-game, we go through our kind of our alignments. We just visually see target lines, target zones, where our aiming points are, stuff like that. So I try to make it, I would say, if you ask most high school kids, they don't have that, and that's more of most high school programs, to what I've learned, don't, their special teams coach is just a guy that maybe he's just there to help, but he doesn't have the
Yeah.
knowledge that, maybe just somebody like myself has. So it's definitely a higher level thing, but I'm just trying to help that transition for them, because it's back to, if those athletes are able to play at the next level, most of the time they should be expected, or they're going to have to
Mhm.
learn how to do that stuff. So it's back to, if I can make that transition to from high school to college a little bit easier, I'd like to do that. So,
Yeah.
because there's just so much
Well,
pressure.
I mean, if your kids have you at their high school, that's fantastic. I mean, in Phoenix here, as we know, it's a pretty big football population. There's a lot of, retired athletes where their kids are in programs, and our programs are robust. They bring in a lot of money, a lot of talent, and not all of them have people that focus on special teams. They just might have like the OC or this that's just like, oh yeah, yeah, go. It's
Yeah.
very mild. So it
Yep.
it almost is a requirement, I would feel like, and you can answer to this being a Kohl's coach. Do you feel like it's almost a requirement to make it at the next level, that you have to, as a specialist, have outside training from your high school?
Yeah, I definitely agree. 110% with that. And no matter who it is that you work with outside of, what your high school program is, any extra knowledge that can just help you with, the kicking aspect of it. Like, because it's not just about, hey, just go kick the ball.
Right.
There's so much that goes into it. And like when I do my small group camps, it's on a super small scale, but I see, as I talked to you this morning about it, I'm now working with kids that are 5th grade to kids that are juniors or seniors. And, I've got to balance, this 5th grader I don't want to say doesn't need a lot of coaching, but let's keep it very plain. in general for him, to where like the junior or senior, I can jump in a little bit more and, try to critique, more things in his
Mhm.
form and his technique and stuff like that. So, but it's not only, like I said, it's not only going over the technique and the form, but most of these kids, they don't situational punt or they don't
Right.
situational kick off. So I get a lot of kids that, they can situational or they can't really situational do anything. Or you see a lot of the talent where unfortunately the program doesn't have a good kickoff coverage. So most kids, they can hit good kickoffs, but when it comes to in season, they just have to like hit squib kicks because they just can't cover the ball well, things like that. So
Okay.
in the off season training, it's okay, what did you do in season? How can we master that? And I always ask, obviously the kids that don't go to CBA that have other high school programs, what does your coach like to do? Does he like to do pooch? Does he like to do small surprise kicks, things like that? And can we master that? But also, hey, how do we start trying to at least help you get an understanding of situational kicking for kickoff? These are your steps for going, middle, deep middle. So that's a simple kickoff. But now we want to go directional right. Because in college, no matter the level, most of the time you're going to have to go situational. We want to go right hash deep right, left hash deep left. If we're punting, nothing's really open field punting. We are all going directional,
Okay.
trying to pin that returner to the sideline. Let's cut the field down into a third and make it easy for our gunners to cover and just shorten that field for space. So in the off season, that's where I think that is a big point, and for guys to have maybe some type of extra help and knowledge of an outside coach that can now take a deeper dive into, all right, let's start talking situational stuff. I think that's the big thing that you don't have at the high school level when you're in high school season.
Mhm.
Especially, like I said, you can have a kid that might not be able to hit a touchback, but he still has a great kickoff leg. But it's that he hasn't got to that touchback line to where his kickoffs are maybe 50 55 yards, which is the 10 or the 5 yard line, but maybe not the biggest hang. So the coverage team, they're only getting maybe 20 yards down the field. The returner's already caught the ball,
Yeah.
explosive returns. So, and it all, I seen it from a coach perspective, it does make sense as well, because that's kind of what we have here at CBA. Like my kickoff guy last year wasn't, he wasn't going to hit touchbacks every time, but he was, how can we start situational kicking? We can set it up left middle and we can do a pop, to the 25-yard line on the right side, or we can do a left middle setup, but we can go to the left side and do a pop. The best part, and I hate to give away the secrets, is like back to the special teams coaches or just coaches in general. Most guys, at least from my experience, don't know how to read kickers and they don't understand
Right.
steps. Like for me, I can watch the the team we're playing, I'll watch their kicker, and this is me not, but if you ask any kickoff guy or just any person with knowledge of kicking, they can watch maybe 5 clips of this guy hitting kickoffs and they can probably tell you where he's going before he kicks the ball just based off his approach. So
Okay.
like we were able to mix it up and even go on the left hash and go to the right side of the field or even left side, and nobody picked up on it. So and it was so I think that answers your question where like the situational stuff, like on in the outside of the high school season, working with a coach that can help you start preparing for more situational, that's going to kind of help you prep for the college side. And that goes to, you know, the college kids that I have now that have, they're playing D3. And I had a kid that committed yesterday that my kind of what I said to him was, next thing you should do is speak with a special teams coach and try to just get a general idea of what they like to do on kickoff. So this kid's a kickoff guy and a field goal guy. Obviously, field goal is pretty much just uprights get
Make it
tighter, your
in.
hashes, yeah, just make it stuff like that. Your uprights get tighter, so you don't need to kick on the high school hashes. Bring it in a little bit. But for
Mhm.
kickoff, if he's a guy that likes to predominantly go deep left from the left middle or middle of the field, I'm not saying you don't work other things, but you definitely want to start focusing on that because once you get there in fall camp,
Mhm.
You don't want to just show up and not knowing what you're doing and trying to figure it out, because it's just
Right.
not going to be a good look. So it's back
Yeah.
to how do we help the transition now in the off season, because high school season's done. Let's help the transition and let's start that process now in February, when you're not going to get there till, late July, August, and you can roll in ready to compete for a job. So
Yeah. So speaking of when you say February, that kind of brings me to if their season's over in like November-ish around Thanksgiving, right? If you don't make the
yeah.
playoffs in high school, you're done before Thanksgiving.
Yep.
How much time do you recommend, like kicker, all of them, just take a break? Just don't do anything.
Yeah, I think it's situational, because there's some guys that, they want to go and compete. Maybe they need some help getting recognition from going to, a Kohl showcase, or just any of the other kicking coaches that are out there that hold kind of showcases to go and compete against other athletes in your region or on a national scale. So there are those athletes that, for me, if they ask me, and if it's a situation where I feel, one, that they can go and compete and do well, and they need help in maybe getting their names out there a little bit more. And if they go there and perform, that's going to help them out. I suggest it. Obviously you have the situation where there's guys that play other sports in the wintertime. So there's that, you can't really control. But if it's an athlete that, as you're asking, is just a kicker, doesn't play a winter sport, let's take I would say like a month off from kicking.
All right.
Maybe, give the legs a recover, just from the kicking side of it, give the legs a break. For us here, like we played our last game the first weekend of December for the state championship, and then the guys got back in the gym the 1st of January.
Okay.
So like for my kickers here, you kind of shut them down from the kicking side of it. Now I'm always open to, don't make ball contact, but you can still work your footwork and your dry runs and stuff like that. So, because I think that's the biggest thing is, for us here in New York, where the weather is obviously harsh, you know, the kids that struggle the most, I think, are the ones that don't kick from high school season, and they don't kick in that from December up until April, and then May rolls around and they're trying to redevelop that muscle memory and just get back into season form is
Yeah.
what I call it. And it takes them, I mean, every guy's different, but it can take them a couple weeks to get back into season form. So my suggestions would be, every situation's different, right? But if you're somebody that maybe doesn't need to go to a showcase or compete in something that's December or January, take a good month off, but still work the dry runs, still work your technique. If you're a punter only, work your hands and your drops, things like that. And then, obviously, if you want to get in the weight room, get in the weight room and start working out. And then, if you have the access, depending on where you live and it's warm or it's cold, you try to get back in and, make the most of what you can. So,
Yeah.
with kicking.
I love that you said the muscle memory piece, because that's where I always encourage the guys. And I would say the guys at the college level, say sophomore, junior year up in college, they understand. Most of them understand the importance of visualization.
Yep.
And I try to tell the guys when they have those off moments, and this would apply when you're going to take a break. It applies the same as when they're injured, right? Most pro injured people, players, they will mental rep, they will visualize, they really stay mentally in the game.
Yeah.
And this is where you're saying if you just do those dry runs, the practices, and even if you say couldn't swing, couldn't throw the tennis ball, whatever it is you're doing, snapping, if they just focus on mental repping a drill
Yeah.
or, visualizing themselves at the new school, going through a practice day, that
Yeah.
keeps that muscle memory. It keeps that bit alive. So I encourage that hands down for all of the kids.
Yeah.
And then leaning into that space, what would you say, knowing from the high school level and at the college level, what do you see that's lacking most at the high school level? And let's keep it at like junior, senior, because they're definitely a different level in the mental game than a
Mhm.
freshman, sophomore,
Yeah.
period, down. I mean,
Yeah.
working with
Yeah.
them, I already know that. They can
Yeah.
be the best in the nation freshman kicker, but mentally, they don't have the game yet.
Yeah. No,
So
100%.
what would you say is the biggest tool that you could give, or piece of advice, or that you do see kids starting to develop, starting to say, oh, now that makes sense, when it comes to, say, the mental piece of it, when they're getting closer to that level of, higher up the latter years, maybe early college? Where are they at mentally that you see is pretty consistent?
Yeah. Personally, I would say I think the biggest thing is just understanding kicking as a whole first, and then being able to understand what kicking looks like just for them, because everybody's different. And I think one of my favorite things I'm doing now at my indoor camps is in the last hour, I take film during the 2 hours of kicking, and then we break it down.
Okay.
And I think that's the best thing you can do. What I've seen personally for the kids I work with is when, and the best example is when, I want to be there, if we're doing, a small group camp, and when the kid can tell me what he did wrong, that is that next step for me. What I tell these athletes prior to when they can, I say, when you guys can finally understanding kicking as a whole, and it's just like school, when you guys understand this type of stuff you learn in math. When
Yeah.
you understand it, look how much better and easier things get moving forward, right? If you don't understand it, you're always just guessing. And I think that's just anything in life is, you've got to learn what you want to know. Because what you don't know, I think it's what he says, what you don't know is what you don't know, right?
Mhm.
So trying to help them understand kicking one. So like for today, I'll circle all the kids up and we'll go through, depending, if they're off a 2 inch or 1 inch or off the ground for field goals. I make sure every kid watches and understands what the changes and the differences are in each style of kicking, right? But then when we go into the film room, because that's the hard thing is no matter if it's a freshman or junior, senior, we're talking here, the kids just want to kick, which I get. That's how it was when I was in high school as
Yeah.
well. But this is going back to like, what I learned from college. I'm trying to get back to the high school level. So it helps with the transition. So when they can watch film and they can be like, yep, they can tell me what they did or what they felt. And then I can reassure them, show them on film, and then we can talk about what the adjustment is. So to me, that would be the biggest thing is for the juniors and seniors is uh, it's not just about kicking, right? We just don't want to just go out and kick and kick and kick. So how can we understand kicking in our own personal technique and form and master it? And then that goes back to like what you were just saying, but the mental reps, the dry runs, the situational stuff, and the juniors and seniors in college know this and they'll always hit on this. But, from if we play Friday here, Thursday, it's a light day, but we'll go on one side of the field and we'll start at PAT. And if our snapper can throw to me, I'll catch and hold. And we're just getting dry runs. We're not making any ball contact, but we're picking out target lines through the uprights and we're getting it's back to just the mental reps. We're trying to make the game situation as easy and not so much of a thought process as we can, but doing the work leading up into game day, starting with Monday through Thursday. So that would be kind of my biggest thing is kids being able to understand kicking, watch film, and understand what they're watching. Because that's where like when I don't break the film down on the field with the athletes because it's just not realistic. But when I can sit them down in a classroom and they have pen and paper or their cell phones to write notes, and the best part is I say to the kids, hey, just because I'm talking about, let's just say Joey here, what Joey's maybe doing good or bad might apply to you when I get to you next. So like pay attention and try to understand different styles of kicking because everybody is different, but in some way or fashion, some form or something like that, it might be able to apply to you. And it's back to what I gave to Joey that might help him next time. If I come to you and I say the same thing or something similar, it might be some type of form, drill work or form, something that, you can also apply to your training. Because I think that's the biggest part is when the kids go home, I don't want them just to be kicking the kick. Let's kick with purpose. So if I'm training with the kids, I go through it like, hey, we'll do a couple no steps and one steps. Let's go through our warm up and we make a consistent warm up. as you would for game day or camp, whatever it is, or, whether it's small group camp. And then what I say is, hey, how's your leg feeling? Okay, feeling pretty good. We're going to do, if we have 5 footballs that are available to us, we're going to do 6 sets of 5 of game reps.
Okay.
And I try to get them to transition in. I know it's just maybe a couple of us out here and there's 5 of us kicking or 10 of us kicking, but how do we flip the mindset of like, these are going to be 6 or 30 total game quality reps that we're going to be able to, like, it's not just, hey, we're just having, like, I want to have fun, right? But let's make these game reps and make the most of them. So we're here to get better and train. So let's switch the mindset.
Yeah. What would you say is something you've encountered or can help parents understand better about that piece going from that high school? Their kid's now committed, he signed, so that piece of pressure is off of the family. And or let's talk about the two. There's the kid that's got that pressure removed, and then you've got the one that's still actively hunting. What can you give to parents, the piece of advice that maybe they miss in that transition piece that would make it easier? And more importantly, probably the moms, I would say, than the dad. The dad's like, yeah, just go, do it. Yeah. But the mom's probably, wanting to prep them for every piece of everything in life, right?
Yeah. I think for obviously the kids that are non-committed, especially if they're finishing up with their senior year, you want to, generally just continue to train and work. Just, I don't think you start kind of focusing to like what I was saying. If I have a kid that is committed, let's try to find out what the coach wants him to start working on now.
I love
leading
that
up. Yeah. So I think there's the differences, so for a non-committed kid, let's just continue to train, get better. I would say master our form. If there's anything from the season that you want to try to critique or fix, let's do that. I would say that the biggest thing you see would really be the field goal kickers is if they haven't kicked off the ground, we need to help them transition from a block to kicking off the ground, which some kids pick up on that quickly, some kids don't. So that's probably the biggest piece. From the recruiting side, I always just try to give some suggestions, and that's honestly like using X as a platform to market yourself to coaches. That's kind of been my bread and butter, I guess, to say. It's something where the athletes are in control. Treat that as like your LinkedIn profile. Reach out to the coach and market yourself. If you can go to a showcase, perfect. But the biggest thing is like, if you go to the showcase, no matter who it's through, you've got to perform. If you don't perform, unfortunately, it doesn't help your situation. So, but if we can take the huddle film and any training film, camp film that you have and put together your resume, and then you just start sending it out to coaches and try to develop relationships. But I always try to encourage that, in the junior year, if possible, just because you don't want to wait till the last second. So that's for the families there. For an athlete that is committed, I think the big difference are really, like you said, the weight's off the shoulders of the commitment part. So, where you're going, so once the summer rolls around, you start getting the college stuff. You go to the Walmarts or Targets and start getting all your stuff for back to school shopping. But for families, I think it's the biggest thing is, making sure their athlete finishes their academic strong in that spring semester. So that's the big thing. Just because we're committed doesn't mean, you finish bad, just not a good look, right? I think at the end of the day, so finish strong.
You could possibly lose it too.
Yeah, and you can lose it. You can get something, a scholarship pulled, whatever, a PWO pulled. So be smart on and off the field, right? So I think that's the other thing. Just be aware of your surroundings, because unfortunately, like one mishap is the make or break. What can also help you lose a scholarship or any type of situation or your future. So if they don't play any spring sports, just kind of continuing to get better, master their craft. Like I said, some, maybe more of your higher Division I guys, they might be able to get some type of like off-season workout plan made from the strength coach at the program they're going to. So that's also, if you can get that off-season workout plan from the strength coach, at your school, in the spring, start doing that. If the parents can hold their athletes, their athletes accountable, because this goes to what I've been saying. It helps that transition period, from graduating high school in April or whatever, May, to then you enroll in the summer and you're thrown right into it.
Mhm.
You are now lifting at a whole nother level, whether
Right.
you've been lifting or not. So what it's just, what academics, what athletics, what kicking, what lifting can I try to get answers from the program that I'm committed to that are going to help me from January to April or May prepare myself physically and mentally to show up day one on
Yeah.
campus, ready to, for some guys, compete for a starting job, that's going to have fall camp, in August. So, yeah.
Okay. When it comes to, it brought me to a thought you had said earlier, and I know this doesn't have a lot to do with transition, but I do think it's important. How do you help the guys? And what piece of advice do you have for them? You're getting ready to do a session today. You said you've, been to Kohl's and Gaines, is it Gatlinburg and
Yeah.
the big camps and stuff. So one thing I'm noticing, and this is even across the boards, even with the draft prep guys right now. I was over at Zoners yesterday with some of the guys, and
Yeah.
one of the biggest problems these guys have, again, even at the high level, is the repetition all
Yeah.
day, like full repetition. Because game day, things like that, where there's that bit of pressure, it's one, and then maybe you have quite a bit of break, and then it's again, and then a break, right? A kicker
Yeah.
might get 3 or 4 opportunities,
Yeah.
depending if he does kickoffs and stuff.
Yeah.
What do you recommend, or how does Cole specifically have you guys been taught to give them any piece of advice to almost say, stay locked in from 1 to 30, right?
Yeah.
That kick. How do you help and encourage in that space? Because it's a big struggle.
Yeah. I think and this would go to the high school and then college level and then guys that are, whether they're free agents or draft eligible guys is, like for Zahner, I would say at this point, you're able to figure out how Zahner runs his combines. So if you can weeks or a month prior, try to rep out what Zahner's combine is going to look like. Because that's the thing, I did Zahner back in 2020, I think right before COVID, and you would kick a field goal and you'd go to the back of the line and then you have to wait,
Yeah.
for, I don't want to say 5 minutes because I don't think it was
I think
that, but you've got, go ahead.
no, you're right. He does it
Yeah.
that way, but we can just stay on brand too. I was at Kohl's last weekend, same one,
Yeah.
same the combine. So, they were run different,
Yeah.
but it's still that same kind of concept of the repetition in
Yeah.
that space. So, yeah, Kohl's Kohl's was definitely, they're very different kind of run
Yeah.
camp and stuff.
Well, I
So,
think about like Jamie, what he did I know I was watching the punt for those guys for the
mhm,
combine, and I think they went like 2 punts directional right, maybe it was 2 punts directional left or 3 each way, and then like an open field flop punt, a flip flop punt. So that's like to where when you go, and this goes back to just your training prep, try to make it, and it's not in this situation for those guys that are draft eligible. If I was to tell if I was training a guy that was going to Jamie's combine for punt, I'm going to say, hey, like if you make it, you need to be able to go 3 directional right, change your feet, and then be able to go 3 directional left. And Jamie's very go, go, go,
right.
and kind of just keeps you in the fire under pressure, which that's the thing also, you know, obviously the high school to college level, you are evaluated at this level. College to NFL, you're evaluated way at this level,
Yeah.
and obviously, you can get fired and stuff like that. It's very cutthroat. So Jamie puts it in a realistic where, hey, like you're here, you either got to perform or you don't. So it's very cut and dry. So which I
It should
believe
be.
that's how it should be.
It
Yeah.
should be.
So that's the way I think about it is like for back to my example with the punts is let's just say we're 3 weeks out, maybe once or twice a week we're going to end or start with 2 or 3 rounds of what Jamie's kind of combine looks like, and we're going to go 3 directional right, you've got to directionally hit the power zone that he has for NFL, yardage and hashes, and then directional left. You got to be able to just turn after your 3 directional right, move your feet, go to the left side of the field and go 3 directional left, and then end with that flip flop punt.
Yeah.
And so, like with the kickoff, I know I was watching that, and you'll hit your kickoff, and then if you're the first guy, you've got maybe 5 or 6 more guys that are lined up that kick. Maybe another group rolls in, so you might be sitting there for a couple minutes waiting. For me, and everybody's different, but what helped me was, one, I didn't watch the other guys kick, because you feel like you have to then match that. And for what worked for me, I think trying to match something that maybe, even if it was realistic, like it throws mixed messages in your head. Like, oh, he just hit this ball, I need to go and match that, instead of just doing what your job is and controlling your part and just hitting your A ball, right? So everybody's different, but one thing that I like to do is, say if I was to hit kickoff, I was the first guy, maybe I'd get off the field. If there's any small adjustments or anything different I felt, I would maybe roll through like another 2 more dry runs. That's what I did in college as well. When we'd roll out for kickoff, I would do a dry run or 2 while the kickoff coverage was talking with the special teams coach, going everything, because that was my kind of final prep that helped me just feel like, okay, I was good to go. So, and for the high school level, when I work with high school kids that are going to showcases, at a small group camp, I'll try to, if I have like 1 or 2 of them, I'll try to make it to where, for the most part, I know what the general field goal script is that Jamie does. I'm going to try to put them through that field goal script and just make them, at least so they're aware of it. And it's back to like when they show up, they're not, they know what's going to happen for the most part. Try to make it as easy as possible. And then, like I said, though, I always say to the parents is, I think this is a great opportunity, but it's on, your student athlete to perform and execute. So,
yeah. I mean, you can't want it more than the kid wants it, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And I find sometimes I'll, a little bit like, and it's like, no, and I'm sure you coaches are the same. It's like, man, you can see the potential and you're like, come on. Okay. I mean, then what would we'll wrap up soon with a couple questions. First, I want to know what piece of advice, and let's go with the couple levels. What piece of advice first could you give high school kids prepping for a big ranking camp like Gatlinburg? What is the best thing they can start doing when it comes to some forms of habits, whether it's, routines? Do you see regularly these high school kids having a consistent pre-rep, pre-game sort of routine in that space? So where can you encourage them in there to get the best out of the camp?
Yeah.
And that comes down to even, should they bring snacks? Like, what do you say? If you could go back now to high school and you got, okay, I'm going to Gatlinburg, how would you do it differently, and how you teach them at high school level?
So I think it would start with, have a warm-up routine that you like and that you do, whether you're training by yourself or with mom or dad, or you're at a small group camp, and don't change it. I think you think about it like for the Super Bowl, the young guys on the NFL teams, when they go for a week before the Super Bowl, you always hear between like the training staff, the coaching staff, the equipment staff, the strength coaches, the nutritionists, they want to keep everything keep everything as same and similar as if they were back home, like for Seattle and New England. They, even though they're in Arizona, or no, I guess this year they're in San Fran, obviously for some New England, they're on the other side of the country, but how can we try to make it as close or as similar to what the day-to-day looks like for these athletes, as we can. So, if I was to go back for myself, it would, hey, and that's what I tell, with the young guys here, for camps, is find a warm-up that works for you, that helps you feel mentally ready and physically, from the stretching side, dynamic and static stretching, just warmed up. And when you go to a ranking camp, it's a lot easier said than done, but don't make it bigger than it is. because I think one of the issues you see is some of these athletes, they go and they're, unfortunately, but that's, if you want to play at a high level and be able to compete, you're around top kickers and punters in the country, especially for guys that come from, maybe, like for me, my area is, I've mentioned to you a couple of the kids that went and played in college. It's been Division III, so there's a lot of the talent's starting to get better, but it's not, I've got all these high talent ranked guys through Kohl, so that's what I've seen sometimes, and it's better. I'd always be open about it, because the families, we talk about it, is, hey, my son went and he loved it, but he was just so nervous because he was around, even like a showcase, he was around 300 kids.
Yeah.
He's never been around 300 kids like that, and there's a lot going on and it's chaotic, and I'm like, totally understand. So it's, sometimes it's okay, it's great just to get that first camp out of the way, and the parents agree, and they say, now when we go back, we know what to expect, and it's
Mhm.
not something that we're like, holy crap, whoa, we're not
Whoa.
thrown off. And then and that's one of the experiences I've had a family tell me. So
Yeah.
but then it's going back to, I want to have keep my stretch and my warm-up routine the same. For field goal, I keep my no sips and try to make it as similar as it is if you were just back home kicking by yourself. Don't change anything, make it any bigger than normal. Back to and then when you are kicking, if you can try to mimic, whether you're by yourself or if there's any possibility, I think this is the better thing too, is if you have, here where there's a group of guys that have the same goals and dreams, and they want to kick at the next level, and you guys can, as best you can, make it into a competition. It's trying to put ourselves into that mindset of competition, and not, because that gets back to what I mentioned earlier. Some kids will struggle getting that, hey, I'm just out here kicking, and how can we flip the mindset to, okay, let me get in game mode, even though it's
Mhm.
the middle of May, there's nobody else out here, I'm not getting a rush, or there's no helmets, there's no shoulder pads. But I think that's one of the best ways, that normally, if you can get a group of guys together that want to compete against each other and see each other be successful, that's going to help you when you show up to the Gatlinburg camp, when there's over 1,000 athletes there, between 8 fields,
Yeah.
and you are obviously, just in general, there's a lot of
A
pressure,
little
just because
nugget
you
in
want to.
the
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I think those are some of the things for the high school kids that can make that, how do I prep for
Mhm.
the showcase that I know is coming up in July? That would
Yeah.
be my suggestion, is don't change anything. And maybe a month leading up, if there's a way you can get together in a group of guys, if you have the access to train with another coach, a Kohl's coach, whoever it is, and they have some other athletes, hey, can we do some type of session that you can put us through what that camp's going to look like? And let's try to just compete against each other, and let's take stats down. So it just helps us feel like this is a competition, um, and just put a little bit of that pressure on
Yeah,
us.
yeah. I mean, I tell them it's the same. I mean, it sounds super simple when I say some of the things. It's
Yeah.
like, compete, don't compare. Just
Yeah.
show up and be you, like, be
Mm-hmm.
your best self. Don't try to outdo the other guy.
Yep.
Do you see it being any different? Because we talked a little bit pre-show, like Tommy coming in, Tommy Doman, how senior year, he's entering his senior year of college. He
Yeah.
did just transition to a new school. So there's that little piece that, you got to get a little comfortable.
Yeah.
But that's a bit easier on going from then go high school to college, right? But
Yeah.
you talked about the senior guys, like that senior in college showing up at, say, Gatlinburg. How do you see that going, and what kind of piece of advice do you give them? Because it's obviously very different than a high school kid who's never been.
Yeah. I think for those, especially those senior level guys, you know, they're in a little bit different situation, because there's maybe a little bit of former critiquing that they need help with at Gatlinburg. But I would say that's a heavy showcase as well, in competition, where, let's, how do we have fun? But, you know, I think those guys also can kind of flip the mindset as well, especially
Mhm.
somebody like Tommy, or I think about Jack Stonehouse as well from Syracuse, or like Ryan Eckley, some of those top punters in this draft class that I think all three got invited to the NFL Combine. Is, all right, you've got you're hanging out there in line and you might be in the middle of the pack. And as you get closer, it's okay. I'm going to get 4 punts here. How do I put my best foot forward and put
Mhm.
up 4 of my whatever, if it's my A balls or my B balls, and perform? So I think for those college guys, the biggest difference is they're obviously evaluated at a totally different level of, all right, we're not now talking about to college coaches about an athlete coming in from high school. You know, Jamie and those Radke, those guys are talking to NFL GMs or NFL special teams coaches,
Yeah.
agents and stuff like that. I think there's more on the line. So, it's how can we put together the information you've given, not from your college career, but like when you come to these showcases, and the stats you put together, it's how do we take your resume that you've built from college and showcases in the off season, and here we can confidently hand this resume to a special teams coach for the NFL or a GM and something like that, and be like, yeah, this is my guy. That if I had to take somebody in the 5th round and I need a punter, this
Hmm.
is somebody I'm comfortable with. So I think that's probably the biggest pressure, is the evaluation is a totally different level.
Right.
And obviously there's hundreds of thousands. I mean, I know NIL is different, but it's only really your top guys for the college level that are getting paid 6 figures. But for the NFL side, it's hundreds of thousands to even some guys, a few $1 million,
Yeah.
that are on the line. And it's definitely, college is now starting to get a little cutthroat too, because they can portal guys real quick. But NFL, as well, you can,
Yeah.
you can cut guys and then things like that. So that would kind of
Yeah.
be where, from the college side, for those seniors showing up to Gatlinburg, I think it's still the same mindset of, all right, I've got limited reps here to perform, which you said this in the beginning of the podcast, is specialists. We might get 1 rep in a game, we might get 8 reps in a game.
Right.
How do we make the most of those reps that we get in a game to prove that we can do this at a high level consistently as well?
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I want to wrap up by, I would love to hear your your path, what you learned, and
Hmm?
now being, a bit older, what would you have done different in your path at each level?
Yeah. So the quick one from high school was, I went to a high school in Indiana. We won 2 games in my 4 years. So, I didn't get as I mentioned about the guys starting recruiting earlier, doing those camps in the off season.
Yeah.
I didn't really get the notice, and social media wasn't what it was then as it is now.
Right.
So I didn't get the notice from high school necessarily. My junior year, I hit a 52-yarder, which helped in game,
Okay.
but I started with Kohl's in my freshman year, and I was doing kind of
Freshman in
small.
high school?
Yes, freshman year of high
Okay.
school. So I was doing those once or twice a year in Indianapolis. And then when I started the showcase side, that was my winter of my junior year. I went out to Texas, um, did well, got invited to underclassmen challenge and did well there at the underclassmen.
Yeah.
And that was kind of that turning point for me, where, one, myself and my family, we saw, okay, maybe there's some potential here. You had the backing of Jamie, obviously inviting you from performance of the showcase in Texas to the underclassmen challenge. So you knew that you had the backing of him and Radke, that this was something potential if we continue to work and get
Okay.
better. And then the spring and summer, that's when, going into my senior year, I kind of went to the college circuit where you start doing camps and stuff like that. I had got my offer that summer going into my senior year from Cincinnati, and committed that fall. And then going into Cincinnati, there was a kicker already there that was a sophomore. He was a sophomore, junior going in when I came in as a true freshman, that did field goals, and I did a kickoffs that season. Now, kind of going back with the helping thing of that transition is, like I said, I never lifted prior to college, so I was lifting a lot, but I was still trying to kick a lot the way I did in high school, and it wasn't realistic. I got hurt my true freshman year and tore my hip flexor,
Yeah.
so that's where that unfortunate learning experience helped me realize, okay, it's not about, it's all about quality and not quantity of reps.
Yeah.
So that would be another thing I would give to an,
A
an
kid.
early kid going into college is back to, we're not doing 40 or 50 reps. We're doing 20 or 25 game reps,
Hmm.
and we're making these game quality reps.
That's fair. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the college side, I kicked off for 4 years. I did a little bit of field goal as well, over the span of 2 years as well. And what I can always just say too, the kicking side has changed so much with the transfer portal and NIL, so there's some things I can't speak to,
Yeah.
which is, I think the roster for specialists, like how many they keep now on roster is a little bit smaller.
Hmm.
And you're starting to see like the high school guys, almost unless like you're one of the top premier guys, you know, for high school athletes, I would give the information to them is even if you got to go kick at a lower level, that's okay. It might not be how you planned or wanted your journey to start out in your college career, but go and get film for a season or two, and you can always transfer back up at a later point. Um, and nobody's gonna look back and be judgmental in a negative way of where your journey started. So sometimes
Right.
I think that's just where the portal has made things turn and how it works now for college football and for the specialist side alone. But yeah, then for me, so I did my, you could say 4 seasons at Cincinnati, and then I took the 3 years or so, unfortunately, during COVID. So where the whole world was kind of all thrown off and everybody was affected. So I took that time to kind of do some pre-draft training. I did my showcase, not my showcase, but my um, oh,
Pro
what
day.
was it? Pro day, yes. But I did that the following year at Cincinnati, and that went well. I did some training as well with Novak out in California, and that was great. And I did mention Zahner as well. So, I tried to give myself the best opportunity and that for me, I knew my resume was a little weak from the field goal side. So, how could I go and compete at these combines of pre-draft guys or NFL free agents that have had workouts before? And how could I build my resume post college to show that I could, obviously at least brought in for a workout. So that was what that following 3 years looked like. And then kind of once that wrapped up, I just wanted to be realistic. I gave it my best shot. I
Okay.
did well at some of those showcases, and I had the small interest, but shut it down. And like I said, I got back into working with Kohl's and kind of helping back with high school athletes with
Yeah.
training, performance, and trying to help them with the transition of kicking from, like I said, some kids are elementary to middle school, high school, and then obviously trying to help them, be able to play at the next level.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I
So,
love that. I mean,
yeah.
so then you're all done. You're like not necessarily hang up the cleats, but now you're just full coach space.
Yeah. Full coach
Okay.
space and stuff like that. So, and I help with the kicking and the special teams a little bit here at CBA Syracuse. And
Yeah.
that's been a great experience over the past 3 seasons. Learning a lot more with football and at the high school level with a great coaching staff, and that's been good. So I think the biggest thing is trying to give back to kids that are in the high school level that might not have the special teams coaches at their high school, and help them in the off season and even during season what they can do, and maybe some things I didn't get when I was their age, how can I give that to them? So yeah.
Yeah. I love that. Well,
Yeah.
I appreciate you taking your time this morning. I know you have to go soon because you have a camp,
Yep.
and for you, it's a few hours ahead. So I
Yeah.
appreciate you, and looking forward to chatting in the future with you.
Yeah, no, thank you for the opportunity to be able to talk about this stuff, and it's always a pleasure, and I'm glad that we can connect on the same type of the mindset of specialists at every level, and
Yeah.
what they can continue to work on doing better to help them, obviously build a kick at a high level for a long period of time.
Yeah,
So
I agree.
yeah,
Thanks so much.
yeah, thank you so much as well.